ESPN's Mina Kimes joining us now on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline. Mina, I was just listening to the latest Mina Kimes show featuring Lenny with Benjamin Solak, and you guys, as part of that, previewing Week 11, obviously looking at this big game for the Seahawks. I wanted to ask you a few questions about your takeaways, starting with your guys' conversation about the Rams using 11 personnel. And you said Seattle matches 12 and 13 personnel with base defense at the lowest rate in the NFL. Why, and how do they get away with it?
Yeah, it's really a testament to how good they've been in nickel, particularly big nickel with, Emmanwori out there. Typically, when a team puts multiple tight ends on the field or backs, but in the Rams' case, it would be tight ends, and you respond by playing with lighter bodies, they're able to run it on you. And that's, we alluded to kind of Sean McVay talking about that in the interview that he did with J.B. Long. But problem for them is Seattle is very unique in their ability to put quote-unquote lighter bodies on the field and stop the run. 3.3 yards per carry versus multiple tight end sets out of those looks. So it's almost like this defense right now was built in a lab to handle what the Rams have been doing with that 13 personnel. And because of that, as Ben and I were discussing, we wonder if maybe they'll actually go away from that and just put the receivers on the field.
You mentioned the Hawks' ability to kind of match up with any type of personnel. And obviously the defensive line is playing great. You're getting good play from your linebackers, even the backups. But it feels like Nick is the reason why, or a big part of why they're able to do this. What is it about his game that you like? And is there anyone else out there in the NFL that kind of resembles what he does?
He's such a unique athlete, and obviously that was known ahead of the draft because of what he did at the Combine, and all you got to do is watch him play. The combination of speed and strength is really rare. But, I'll say, as much as I love the pick for Seattle, I thought there would be more of an adjustment just watching him on tape, South Carolina, sometimes in terms of like angles and missed tackles here and there. But what amazes me so much watching him on the field is he's just almost always in the right position. There's like an understanding of his role in the defense that I think speaks to just how well it's being taught in Seattle, right, by Macdonald. And I know he's got, the Dirty, I think his name is, and some of the other defensive coaches on that staff. As far as who he reminds me of, Kyle Hamilton is brought up a lot, I think, especially given that speed size combo, and obviously Macdonald coming from Baltimore. And I think that's fair. But against the run, I mean, geez, you're thinking about like some of the better run defending nickels in the league, DeJean being one of them. Also, that comes to mind, and he really does play like him out there.
Seattle has been really explosive through the air. The run game hasn't been what they've wanted it to be, but it has opened up some really good opportunities for play action. It's taken some pressure off the offensive line. But naturally, I went into this kind of looking at it from like a, not defensive as in that side of the ball, but kind of like, oh God, how can Seattle try to get this done? This is the toughest opponent that they face this year. This is going to be such a good game. And I kind of went away from looking at what they're bringing to the table and the challenge that they pose to the Rams. What's the opportunity for Seattle against the Rams? I guess what I'm ultimately asking is if there's a Rams weakness. And then how much faith do you have in this defense against Matthew Stafford, who's having an MVP caliber season?
So starting with the Rams defense, I mean, they've really improved a lot this season. But, like by most metrics, they're top 10, even higher defense, both against the pass and the run. I think there's two things that jump out. I do not think there's a corner right now who can handle Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think they know that. So I suspect we're going to see a lot of, bracket coverage on JSN. So there'll be opportunities for Shaheed. This is why you go get Shaheed, right? When you play a defense that knows it's outmanned, that does not trust any of its corners against JSN, there will be opportunities for the other pass catchers. But I also expect Chris Shula, their defensive coordinator, to basically beg Seattle to run the ball in this game. I think they're going to see a lot of light boxes, a lot of split safety shells. And so, whether or not that run game that you alluded to can be more efficient and even potentially explosive like we saw last week, I think is going to be important. And then on the other side of the ball, pressure to me is the name of the game. If the Rams do lean more into the three wide receiver sets, even potentially like put Stafford in empty here and there, try to get guys out. I think for Seattle, the quick pressure, confusing the Rams offensive line with all of the things that they do up front, some of their timely blitzes, is going to be paramount.
The narrative with Sam Darnold has been, well, in the big games, he crumbled, right? You got the 2 games last year, and I feel like this is his opportunity not to kind of prove, the public wrong, but kind of, get himself going. He can prove to himself that he can play in this league. What's a successful game look like for Sam Darnold? We saw him throw, 12 passes last week for a buck whatever and 1 touchdown, and we felt like that was good enough. But what does it look like this week for the Rams?
Yeah, I think just kind of avoiding negative plays is really important, both in terms of sacks, but also fumbles and then obviously interceptions. Thinking back to that game, that playoff game, the offensive line, Minnesota, was getting their tails kicked, but it also felt like Sam was really rattled by some of the Rams' simulated pressures. And then they didn't have quick game answers for him, and I think Kevin O'Connell wears some of that as well. So I think getting Sam to just play like clean football, giving him quick answers. The Seattle does hunt big plays a lot, and for good reason. But if the Rams take that away, if there's a concerted effort to put a shell on this offense, a roof on it, just getting the answers underneath and being efficient is going to be important.
I think that it's taking a big picture look at Seattle, and inevitably we'll end up doing it for the Rams as well, but they haven't struggled with this as much. Seattle's kind of struggled with identity and consistency, and that's not at all uncommon. It's easy to say we want this identity, and then to actually follow through with it is tough, and that takes out the need to kind of change and adapt week by week or as you get injuries. But Mina, I'm wondering how you feel about Seattle and what they've been able to establish there, because for me, what's made previewing this game so fun in particular is that it feels like both of these teams have so firmly established that. I know what they want to do. I know what they might do. They're also obviously explosive and electric and just very, very good top to bottom. But something about knowing who they are has made previewing this really fun, and it feels like more of a chess match. Is that kind of something you've noticed about Seattle's season so far?
Yeah, definitely. I think defensively, this is I wouldn't say most, but it's the combination of scheme and talent. When you think about the best defenses in the NFL, I mean, there's defenses with more I would say big name pass rushers, Texans, for example, or even the Broncos. You have your number 1 corner, Surtain, and their pass rush is really good. But Seattle, it just feels like every player is playing at a high level, and everyone understands their roles. And there's also the nature of the scheme is just constantly confusing offenses in a way that I do think gives them a pretty clear identity. And then on the other side of the ball, we know that this does have a very clear identity. They want to go under center. They want to play action off of that. They're explosive. It's that outside zone run game. And, they've also benefited from playing with leads a lot of the time as well. So I think going into this game, that to me makes the coaching battle between these two sides, on both sides of the ball, by the way, really fascinating, because you could argue both of these coaching staffs are at the top of their games, and it'll be interesting to see if anyone changes some of those tendencies to sort of disrupt them.
At the end of last year and then coming into this season, this offensive line was considered bottom 5 in the league, right? And you get this Kubiak offense, and you feel like they were going to get better just because of the scheme. That was going to help them out too. But they've been playing some decent ball. I mean, only giving up 10 sacks, and Sam Darnold has a lot to do with that. He's elusive. Obviously, the play action, all that good stuff. But how much has this offensive line improved to you?
They've improved a lot. The scheme helps, but also, the players that they've added to me. Last year, I thought Cross was pretty much the only player you could really count on the offensive line, especially in pass protection. But now you add, obviously, their first-round draft pick, Ray Zabel. People forget Abe Lucas missed most of the season, so right tackle was just a major, major problem for Seattle. And so, people point to Bradford a lot, but when you reduce the number of potential weaknesses to just 1, maybe 2 at times, you're solving a lot of your issues for sure, especially in a scheme like outside zone where you're kind of so much on the line to work together as a unit almost. So I think it's a combination of the players and the scheme, but also, again, getting to play with leads, not having to play catch up a lot of the time. That helps too. It's complementary football. I think they benefit from what's happening on the other side of the ball greatly.
I don't think Mike Macdonald is going to win Coach of the Year. And we've talked about with other guests and on other parts of the show about Shane Steichen and Vrabel and other candidates around the league. But that being said, what he's done is absolutely amazing, and it's the consistency with which he's done it going from Baltimore to Seattle. If there was a case to make for him, what one could you make?
Yeah, I mean, if this ends up being the best team in football, which is absolutely on the table, we don't usually reward that, especially, it's usually, Coach of the Year is usually a turnaround award, but that's certainly a 2-year turnaround. I mean, what he's done with this defense, exactly what he did with Baltimore, it's not just taking a unit that was playing at a bottom 5 level before he arrived and making them average. He turned it into the best defense in the NFL by many metrics, just like he did in Baltimore. I do not think that can be overemphasized enough. And yeah, they've added players for sure, but it's just a top to bottom revamp. It's just such an unbelievable turn of fate. So I think he deserves a ton of credit for that, as well as obviously the decisions in terms of coaching hires, moving on quickly, the players they've added have helped. But I think he's been remarkable and deserves a ton of credit for what's happening in Seattle.
Let's go into both, coaches' meeting rooms and break down the priority. If you are the Rams, what's priority number one to stop the Seahawks? And if you are the Seahawks, what's priority number one to stop the Rams?
For the Rams, priority number one is to stop the explosive pass and to get Seattle to run the ball, and then you try to stop it. But I think that, like I said, that's going to be their goal, just given that Seattle's been pretty inconsistent there. And then for Seattle, in addition to running the ball, if they do that, I would say the thing you want to do is stop explosive plays in the passing game. I would say, though, more so pressure Matthew Stafford is really, really important in this one. He's been great under pressure, but can be a little bit up and down. You can turn him over potentially, and Seattle's pass rush has just been tremendous this year.
Speaking of the run for Seattle, how much of their struggles is just facing stacked boxes, and how much of it is, look, there are still some questions about your offensive line or maybe a running back or scheme thing? I'm having a hard time figuring it out.
Yeah, I think it's more of the latter than the stacked boxes, because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but even when they do run into light boxes, it's still not as good as it could be, in terms of consistency. I think it's mostly it's blocking, to be honest. But it seems like it's getting better as the year goes along, so it seems to be trending in the right direction.
What's the environment like over there in SoFi? I mean, we outside looking in, I've never been to SoFi, but you always see the ops, right? The Niners, the Hawks are going to travel. What do you anticipate, and what is it typically like over there?
Yeah, it's pretty. There's definitely, you see a lot of opposing fans. I do think you'll probably see a decent amount of Seahawks fans, especially given the time of year, right? It's a good time of year to come to LA, although it's actually raining today, so we'll see. It's supposed to stop by Saturday, but we shall see what happens there. But Seattle's been so good again on the road in the Mike Macdonald era, and this year it's kind of hard for me to think of it as being that much of a factor. People say, well, you don't want to go to Seattle and play. And I'm like, what? You kind of don't want Seattle to come to you right now. I think, especially when in a place like SoFi where noise and weather aren't really major factors.
Yeah. A benefit of having you here, not only understanding plenty about the entirety of the league, but understanding plenty about the history of Seattle, is that you have a general feel for what a dominant Seattle team feels like and what a less dominant one feels like. How does this one compare? We were trying to figure this out the other day. Bump mentioned this is the most dominant team he can think of in probably a decade. What about you?
Yeah, definitely since the prime Legion of Boom era. I think about the early Legion of Boom years where, or I would say maybe Russell Wilson's second year was when, they were just putting up 50 burgers weeks in a row. You remember that? And people were like, is Pete Carroll doing too much? Funny in retrospect. But the defense was dominant, but so was the offense at that time. I mean, they just felt like they could score on anyone. But I mentioned this on my pod. The feeling I get, this offense is great, but I'd like to see them. I think this is going to be a really good test The defense, to me, I feel like it's reminiscent. I mean, obviously this is a test too, and people point to the Bucs game, but you guys know half of the defense was missing for that game. But when I watch this defense, what reminds me, just from a fan perspective, is the feeling around those years, 2012, 13, 14, where you were almost excited for the defense to get on the field, especially when the other team had to pass, just because you knew what a pack of wolves they looked like, and especially against, in obvious dropback situations. And that's how I feel watching them now.
NFC West Side Story. Mina and Ben Solak preview every Week 11 game with a big focus on this Rams-Seahawks game. Mina does make a pick, but I'm not going to spoil it. Go listen to it in the latest episode of the Mina Kimes podcast featuring Lenny. She is ESPN's Mina Kimes. Thanks, Mina.
Thanks, Mina.
Thanks, guys.